Hey everybody, I'm Byron once again. I'm here to give a testimony for Jesus Christ. I wanted to talk a little bit about myself, a little bit about where I'm from, where I'm coming from, and all that stuff. Not exactly where I'm from in the world or where I'm at, but the point of reference at which I was in when Jesus Christ came to me in a mighty way, saved my life. I was born, and probably before I would even remember, I was in church. At about the age of 6 or 7, I accepted Jesus Christ as my Savior and was in church Sunday night, Sunday morning, and Wednesday night, probably more often than even that. Grew up knowing that you're supposed to be in church. At a very early age, and I don't know exactly what time this was, but I know I wrote it on kindergarten paper. I actually wrote one of these: when I grow up, I'm going to be a preacher. That is the impact that church had on me in my life. As time went along, I don't know exactly how this happened, but there was a falling away. And then a little revival coming back to Jesus. And I remember very vividly when I was probably about 14 years old or something, I began to stray. And what I mean by that is I began to be influenced by the world. The world has many influences that make it very difficult unless you are just totally focused on Jesus Christ with blinders on to follow Him. One of the tricks, or one of the things that I think I fell into, is that I was doing things similar to other people that were in church with me were doing. Almost as if I was feeling peer pressure a little bit from my peers who were in church. But anyway, life was always pretty easy on me, had a wonderful home life. And then I was active in sports, very popular in school. Ended up going to college on a baseball scholarship, went into the Army, did 10 years in the Army actually. Decided I wanted to get out and do my own thing. While I was still in high school, around 1980, I was in a revival at church. And I honestly didn't know the voice of God until this moment. But God spoke to me that night. I remember there was tons of people in the church and all that stuff. But I heard God say, "I got plans for you." That's all I heard. Just a real soft voice, really in my head. It was as if God said, "I got plans for you." I was standing there was all kinds of people around and this and that, and there was an altar call, and I didn't know anything other to do than to walk down to the front of church and tell the preacher God just told me He had something for me to do. And I was fired up for Jesus at the time. I was like, man, He has spoken to me, man. And the group of people that I was with, the youth group, they were fired up too. There had just been this revival. Seemed as if I was like in the most popular church in the city. Everybody seemed to want to come there, etc., etc. As time went along on this little journey here, little by little, there was less people fired up for Jesus and more people kind of in the church for the show. And I remember we had a little witnessing program where we'd go out and tell people about Jesus and things like that, which started out as pretty good size and then finally dwindled down to 3 people. And I can't say other than I felt as if I needed more people around me. That was probably the weakness that I had. And somehow I lost my way following Jesus. There was some alcohol, there were girls, there were all kinds of influences and things like that. And I pretty much went on my own way all the way up until around 1995 or 6. Very eventful time. My father had committed suicide. I was in Germany at the time, came back, had a funeral. And then there was this one man, first name was Bob, took an interest in me, and we began to have a Bible study. And I remember that I was so enthused that there was one other person seemed like fired up about Jesus Christ. And I guess I used the energy off him to propel myself some. But then God began to deal with me again. And in some of my videos, you might hear me talking about this place of rest. But at that time, in the 95, 96 time frame, possibly 97, but I think it's more in the 95, 96 time frame, God started showing me this place of rest, literally in my mind. And I remember I walked with a friend of mine over some ground one time, and I said, man, look, see how this is laid out? Here's where these things would be. And as I alluded to in another video, I thought to myself, we have to make this place here on this earth because people need to find this rest that God has promised them. For whatever reason, you know, I know the reason. Peer pressure, the things of this world crept back in, and I walked away from God again. And I want to make a distinction here. I don't want you to think I walked away from church or walked away from people. I walked away from God. And there's a distinct difference. I know that there's people in church who are in church but have walked away from God. But whatever the case, life went on and I went on doing my own thing. At one point in time, I decided to do my own business. And I remember taking a photo this one day. I counted the cars. I had a car lot, used car lot. And I counted the cars on the car lot. I had 65 cars sitting out on this car lot. And I took a picture of that. And I was standing on the porch of where the car lot was. And I told this guy, I said, that's it, man. That's the goal that I had set. Look at it. It's amazing, isn't it? What I didn't really realize at the time is how quickly wealth can flee. And how quickly a world can just literally be ripped up apart and turned upside down. And it can happen in a very short period of time. In Revelations, Jesus talks about the Laodicean church. And he basically says, because you are rich and increased with goods, you have no need for me. And that's what he had against that church. In this world today, I know that there's many people that are deceived by wealth. This is probably the most prosperous country that's ever existed. Our poor people are richer than most people throughout the world and also throughout the history of time. So when I say wealth, I'm not talking about the wealthy people that you look and see their big house. I'm talking about everybody, for the most part. But wealth is deceiving because you can have a big house. You can have a house that's so big that you can't even fill the rooms when you move in with your furniture. You have to go out and spend more money just to fill the rooms up. You can have a house and look at that house and think, man, I've made it. I did those things. I had a house so big, I didn't know what to do with it all at one point. But by going my own way, I learned what it's like to reap the benefits of doing things my own way. And in a very short period of time, everything that I'd ever thought mattered in life crumbled. I lost a family. I lost a business. I lost the house. It got to the point that on my daughter's 17th birthday, I handed her a sheet of paper with the word me, M-E, on the sheet of paper. And with tears in my eyes, I handed her that sheet of paper and told her, that's all I can give you. I was embarrassed. I didn't want anybody to know the situation that I was in, and I hid from the world. Along in that process, I drank plenty of beer, did plenty of stupid things, hurt a lot of people. But I lived my own way. And I got to tell you, it wasn't all that bad until it crumbled. And when it crumbled, it crumbled. I remember there was a day in my life, and I got to tell you, had it not been for the events of this day, I wouldn't be right here in front of you. There was a day in my life I raised a gun to my head. Almost got it to my head. And my intentions were to end this life. I had seen my father, or I knew that my father had done that. And I'd been aggravated with him for many years, thinking, how could you do that? Then there I was, raising a gun to my own head. And I thought, if I could just pull this trigger, I'll be out of this misery that I'm in. So as I got the gun almost to my head, the phone rang. I don't know how that happened, but it did. And I thought, I better answer that phone. So I answered the phone. It was my sister. She said, how are you doing? And for some reason, I said, I'm not doing good at all. She said, I'm on my way. So I knew I had maybe 10, 15 minutes to finish the job before she could get there. So I raised the gun again, got it almost, I remember I could see inside the barrel as it came up toward my head. And there was a knock on the door. And I'm thinking to myself, pull this trigger with these people standing at the front door? No, maybe not. I decided to answer the door. There was two friends of mine. And they could look at me and tell that something was wrong. They came in. I got through the day under watch and never ever raised a gun to my head again. But I wasn't fixed. I was just tolerating life or getting through life. I've thought back many times on that day. In a matter of 2 minutes, I received a phone call and a knock at the door while I was trying to kill myself. And as I look back on that day, I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, the only way that could happen was that if God intervened. So I can tell you today, I'm actually making this video because God intervened. But at the time that all this occurred, I still wasn't thinking about God. I wasn't through I wasn't finished with my misery yet. So time went on, continued to hurt. I finally got to the point I was so depressed, and I didn't know depression could do this, but it can. Never had empathy for someone who's depressed until I experienced it myself. But I can tell you, depression is real. And it's something that I don't feel as if people, at some point in time during the depression, they really don't have that much control over it. Because I got to the point where I was flat on my back in the bed. The only thing I really could do was get up and use the restroom and come back to bed. And I would tell someone, tomorrow I'm going to get up. You got to understand this. Put this in perspective. I had already had a divorce. I was paying child support through the means of others. And then I actually was going to have to go to court because of not paying child support. You would think that would be a motivator to somebody and think, well, I bet that'll get them up out of bed. It didn't. I was past the point of no return. I mean, There was nothing I could muster up in my life, no energy, no strength, whatever, that I could do to get up out of that bed. And I want you to understand this. You're hearing this from a guy who, for the most part, was always the fastest guy on the sports team. Very strong, very athletic. I went into the Army, was an airborne ranger, went to 2 wars. Honestly, tried out for the Cincinnati Reds. Things just weren't that difficult for me to do in my life. Except this one thing. I couldn't function in life anymore. And this went on and on and on until finally the idea went from my head to my heart. And I realized in my heart, you know what? You're finished. There's no more hope. It's over, dude. You can't trick yourself anymore. You're finished. And then after telling someone I'm going to get out of bed, and that being another lie, I laid into bed this one day until finally, and I don't know how this happened. I'm very honestly, I don't know how this happened other than absolute pure desperation. I remembered God. But not just a God. I remembered God, the Father of Jesus Christ. And I thought to myself, man, you told me that you wanted me to do something. And I've blown it. I've blown it, not just for me, but for a lot of people. So as I laid there in that bed, knowing I wasn't getting up, I cried out to God. And I told him, I said, God, the only way that I'll ever come up out of this bed is it if you raise me out of this bed. Because I can't do it. I'm finished, man. I'm defeated. It's over. I don't know exactly how everything transpired that specific day. But I do know that the next day I woke up and I decided to call a man who had been trying to get in touch with me for about 2 weeks. And I dialed the number. Now, this was a man I had not seen in 25 years. And I said to that man, I hear you were trying to get in touch with me. Sorry I haven't called you back. What's going on? And he asked me, well, Byron, I've had you on my mind a lot lately. How are you doing? And I just had to break down and tell the man, dude, I'm broke, man. It's ugly. It only took me about 3 minutes to tell him what a pitiful shape I was in. But I remember looking at the cell phone after the call. And the cell phone call lasted an hour. And I think I talked for 3 minutes. And for 57 minutes, this man, 3 or 4 states removed from me, started telling me things that were going to happen in my life. And part of the conversation, I was listening to him and I was thinking, yeah, go ahead, okay, all right, get this off your chest. But then part of the conversation, I was sitting there thinking, man, I just prayed to God yesterday and just got the courage to call you today. He told me things like, this year will be the best year of your life. And you got to realize, this year already consisted of alcoholism, depression, bankruptcy, etc., etc., divorce. And then he said, this year is going to be the best year of your life. I had no clue how somebody could say that to me. But I listened to him for 57 minutes after I took my 3 minutes to just basically tell him how screwed up I was. And he also told me about a spirit that had been plaguing me for years. I had no clue what he was talking about. I'm like, dude, man, where are you coming from? Are you sure this thing exists? He told me, yeah, definitely, that's it. He said, go get you a book about it. Then he told me, you're going to meet a group of men that will support you and help you in this recovery. After that, the phone call's over with. I'm standing around thinking, this dude's lying his butt off. The following morning, I got up and I got out of bed. I actually made it out of the house this morning because I had a book that I needed to get about this spirit that he was telling me about. So I drove down to this bookstore. I don't know how many options I had. I just happened to go to this one specific store. And I walked in the door. As I walked into that door, to the left, there was a little room off to the left. And there was about 8 or 9 men sitting around the table in that room. Honestly, it didn't click in my head what was going on when I walked in. And the guy came out of that room and he looked at me and he said, can I help you? I said, hey, a guy has told me about this spirit that's been plaguing me. I ain't got a clue what he's talking about. Could you show me something in your store? Or do you have something in your store that would help me learn about this? He said, sure. Took me over there, handed me a book and said, this is it, man, read the book. I was like, cool, paid for the book. As he was walking me back toward the door, he looked at me and he said, hey, we got a group of men in here that meet 3 times a week, every morning. 3 times a week in the morning. And we'd be more than happy for you to join us. Under normal circumstances, I would have said, man, dude, I got to go read this book. But I had just been told the day before, you're going to find a group of men that will support you. For some reason, I told him, can I walk in there today? And I walked in there, and I'll never forget the feeling I had walking into this room. Because here was this group of men doing a Bible study. And in walks this man who's battled alcoholism, who's bankrupt, who's lost his family, who spent 3 weeks in jail, and the next time he's going to spend an extended term in jail. And all I could do was walk in there, sit down, and think, I hope they don't really know who I am. Because if they know who I am, they might not let me in here. So for 3 days, by the way, I made it out of bed 3 days. For 3 days, I met with those men. And for 3 days, I listened to those men talk and say things and this and that. But there's this one phrase, this one word they kept saying over and over and over again. And it really troubled me because I honestly didn't know what they were talking about. Almost every answer to every question was the cross. And I would hear them say that. And I knew Jesus died on a cross. Then something else would come up. And they would say, the cross. Again, in my head, I'm thinking, okay, yep, I know what a cross is. Let's get past this, man. So for 3 days, I'm silent. I'm listening to them say these words over and over again. And then the third day, I'm sitting there thinking, okay, these guys know something that when they say the cross, they mean a whole lot more than what I know. So toward the end of the third session, I looked at this one man, and I don't know why I chose this one particular man, but I looked at him and I said, what do you all mean when you say the cross? He began to talk, and then another guy interrupted him, guy off to my left. He said, man, it'll take you years to figure this one out. I'm thinking, I don't have years, man. I need to know what you're talking about. And this man looked at me. And you got to realize this may be elementary to you. But for a guy that is on his last leg, I heard some beautiful, beautiful music. He said, Jesus died on the cross for you. But not only did he die on the cross for your sin, but his death here on this earth, and I can't say exactly how he said it, but his death here on this earth, his burial, his resurrection, his ascension into heaven, made it possible for God to send the Holy Spirit. And you accepting Jesus, when you accept him, you die. That symbolizes your physical death in this world, but you are raised with Christ in his resurrection. And then God puts his Spirit in you so that you no longer live this life. God lives his life through you. You're not making the decisions, he is. That may sound elementary. And I can tell you, I remember hearing that when I was a little kid. But for some reason, I had not heard that in a long, long, long time. Now here's a guy who has screwed up his life. Just a few days ago, I couldn't even get out of bed. And now there's a man telling me there's somebody willing to live my life through me. I'm thinking, man, this is a deal. This is the bomb, man. In essence, I thought, so maybe I can't screw this up anymore. Maybe I can do something right. That's what I was thinking. So I stayed with those men for about 3 months. During those 3 months, and I didn't know God could do this, but I'm telling you, he does. He spoke to me. He told me what to do. One day I was riding down the road. I looked to my left and a gentleman was passing me in another car going the other way. And God said, go stop that man. I'm thinking to myself, what? And I followed that man finally until he stopped. Very awkward. He stopped at a hotel. He went and got in the hotel room. But there was a lady standing out there by the car that I had followed, and I walked over to the lady. And I just looked at her. I said, this is going to sound crazy, but God just told me to stop and talk to that man that just walked in there. I said, do you know him? And she said, yeah, that's my husband. And I said, do you know why God might have told me just stop and talk to him? And she said, he's an evangelist. 2 weeks later, I was speaking in his church, the church that he was speaking at. Very brief, but telling people what God had done for me. God showed me so many things in a small amount of time. I can't cover them all here in this period. I just wanted you to know that this God, this Jesus, the one they killed, saying he wasn't the Son of God, the one that many people go to church every Sunday and really don't look for because they're there for something else. He's alive, man. He is alive and speaking, giving instructions. One of the craziest things he told me one time. I'm a guy, I had no money, no job. I really, if it weren't for people that knew me, handing me crumbs, I wouldn't have made it. And in the middle of all this, I prayed to him and I said, what do you want me to do? I said, maybe I could revive this car business, or maybe I could clean carpets, or maybe I could take this job over here at this plant. I gave him 3 options. And I stayed in a room for about 2 hours. And God, tell me what to do. He told me to leave and go to a city that's 480 miles away. I said, I didn't even know where the city was. I had to look on the map. I mean, even after I got to the city, I had to look at the map for like another month to really figure out where in the state I was at. He's powerful. He is absolutely so powerful. But he's not going to force anybody into anything. You may be like me, or like I was. You may have just enough to not really need God. And you may be fooling yourself into thinking, no, I go to church. Byron, you're not talking to me. I sit right down there on the 3rd row. No, actually, most of the time I'm in the choir. I used to do those things. I taught Sunday school one time. But I wasn't listening to God. I was just telling the people what I knew. Jesus Christ speaks. He talks. He instructs. There's plenty of wonderful things written in the Bible. I don't doubt any of it. But he's alive and living and breathing life into our bodies. He quickens us. I see him, somewhere evidence of him almost every day in this dark, dark world. And as people all around the world are sitting here going, oh my gosh, it's getting worse, I'm sitting here thinking, guys, if you knew what I knew, if you knew what I knew, if you knew that no matter what happens, I'm his. What can death do to me? What can misery do to me? I'm going to be with Jesus forever. People, Jesus Christ is no joke. He is no joke. You may not know him, or you may know about him and think you know him. He talks to you. Like, for example, I know President Obama, or I know about President Obama. But if I were to say, hey, President, he would look at me like, yeah, what's up, dude? You know I'm the president, right? But one day Jesus is going to look at me and say, Byron, come on, man. You at least walked with me for that portion of time you were here on the earth after I saved you, man. Listen to my words. God is talking. This is more than a Bible. This is more than a church. This is Jesus Christ. Christ in you. There's some, I guess, humanly beautiful sinner's prayers. But I'm going to tell you, man, blind Bartimaeus in the Bible said it best. Jesus, have mercy on me. Cry out to Jesus, man. He's there. Don't let the house fool you. Don't let the cars fool you. Don't let the fact that somebody patted you on the back for something you did fool you. You got to have Jesus, man. You got to have Jesus. Thank you.